Hey guys, Metal Jesus here. Now I recently bought the brand new PlayStation VR 2 headset. And the reason why I did that is because over the last couple of years, I've actually spent a lot of time in VR. I like it a lot. I got my start with the original PlayStation VR, but then I quickly moved over to the Quest 2, which is a headset that I really like a lot. And now I have the brand new PlayStation VR 2. And so in this video, I want to go over the pros and cons of each of these, comparing the PlayStation VR 2 to the Quest 2. And to help me do this, I've reached out to my nephew William, his girlfriend Nicole, and my good buddy Scott. Let's take a look. To compare these two devices, we're going to break this into 4 different categories, starting with the headset and setup. We're also going to compare the controllers as well as the ecosystem. And then, of course, we're going to look at a bunch of games because it's all about the games, right? And then I'll give you my final thoughts and recommendations. Starting with the headset and setup. Now, the good news is the PlayStation VR 2 is pretty much better than the original in almost every way. The original PlayStation VR was an absolute mess. It had this breakout box, it had all these different labeled cables that you had to plug in just right. It was really almost like an afterthought for the PlayStation 4, and I'm happy to report that the PlayStation VR 2 only has one cord. And thankfully, it's a really long USB-C cable. But I gotta say, it's still not great, especially after using the Quest 2 for the last couple years. The freedom to play VR anywhere on the Quest 2 is just so liberating. Pretty much any space should be able to do it. You don't need to be near a TV or a console or a computer or anything. In my game room, I don't really have that much room between the couch and the entertainment center. I have that small coffee table that I like to use, and I do use it all the time. I can move it out of the way, but really, I have that little piece of game room over to the right there that I've been using for VR with the Quest 2 for several years now. And yes, the PlayStation VR 2 cable is barely long enough to support that. But again, it's not optimal. I really wish it was wireless. And so I really have to give it to the Quest 2 here because it has no cords, barely any setup. You don't even need a computer or anything to use it. The PlayStation VR 2 headset is definitely improved over the original, which is to be expected. And actually, it's very comparable, again, to the Quest 2, although it has less weight in the front of it. So while I do think the Quest 2 headset is actually really comfortable and not a problem, but then you put on the PlayStation VR 2 headset, the brand new one, and it's very comfortable as well, a little bit more balanced. I think you can probably end up wearing it longer. And because it's tethered to the PlayStation 5, there's no battery in it, so that's part of the reason why it's also lighter. Another nice feature about the PlayStation headset is this light shield. It really is comfortable, very flexible, and pretty much just keeps out all light. One of the coolest things about the new PlayStation VR 2 is the eye tracking. It's awesome. It's game-changing, literally. It's so cool, and most of the games actually use it. What it does is basically give you a higher resolution where you are looking in the game. And it's doing that, I assume, to probably improve performance and basically make the game, run better, probably maybe less motion sickness. I'll give you an example. Right here, we're playing the new Gran Turismo 7 in VR, and you'll notice that on the outer edges here, look how low resolution that is. That's because Scott is not looking in that direction. See, what we're looking at here is what I captured off the Elgato, but Scott doesn't see that low resolution because the game is tracking his eyesight and giving him a really crisp version of that wherever he looks in the screen. It's amazing. And so because of that, the game has more resources to give you better performance. It's really cool. The new PlayStation VR headset also supports rumble, which is pretty neat. Some games, if they have rain hitting your character's head, you might feel a little tapping on your forehead. But ultimately, I'm not sure if you really need it or not, but it's cool that's there. Also, it has a built-in fan to keep both the CPU cool inside the headset, but also it keeps the inside of the mask from fogging up. And I gotta tell you, actually, it seems to work pretty great. Now, one caveat I found with the PlayStation VR 2 headset is that getting a perfectly sharp image does tend to be kind of tricky. So I had 3 separate people come over and try this over the past week or so. And it's interesting because having the headset just like a millimeter up or down on your face could make a huge difference between whether the picture is sharp or not. There's also a dial over on the left-hand side where you can adjust the lenses, because everybody's eyes are a little bit different. Everybody's face is a little bit different. And so there is definitely some setup with this to get it really sharp and make it the best experience that you possibly can. Also, some people have noticed that there's a slight grain or kind of pixelated effect to the visuals with the PlayStation VR 2, especially when looking at, say, white or a gray part of the screen. I kind of noticed it when I first started messing around with this, but honestly, it hasn't bothered me at all. Usually there's just so much going on in these games in VR that's never really an issue, but I just wanted to kind of mention it because some people online have definitely complained about it, and I think some people are more sensitive, to it than others. However, again, I had a bunch of people over at my house messing with this, and literally nobody else mentioned it at all. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the controllers. I think the PlayStation VR 2 controllers work fine. They're certainly an upgrade from those kind of cheesy Move controllers that you would use, that they kind of took from the PlayStation 3 era and used them for VR. I mean, those worked okay, but it's nice that these are designed specifically for this experience. One difference between the PlayStation controllers and the Quest controllers is that circle that goes around your wrist. And there's been reports of people with larger hands that don't really like this, and I'm kind of in the middle. I've gotten used to it. Basically, these little circles are used to track the 3D position of your hands. There are many LEDs that are all around that band right there that the cameras on your headset actually look down at. That said, actually, I feel like the hand tracking still could use a bit of work on the PlayStation VR 2, especially compared to the Quest. I mean, you see it here where your hands are kind of glitching around sometimes, especially if they're really low. If they're right out in front of the cameras, it seems to work great. But if you are using your hands lower, it seems to have a little bit of a tracking issue. Not a game breaker by any means, and it never really affected my gameplay that much. So I do feel like maybe they can kind of fix this in software at some point. But I rarely had that problem with the Quest 2. I definitely feel like the tracking is much better there. I have to say that the trigger feedback on the PlayStation VR 2 controllers is way better than the Quest 2 controllers. Games like Pistol Whip make you just feel like you're holding a real weapon. There's some weight to it, and also some resistance in your fingers when you're playing that game. It feels awesome. Overall, I actually think I like the size, design, and the feel of the Quest 2 controllers a bit more. I mean, sure, they don't have that neat feedback and resistance built into the triggers, but overall, I just feel like they're a little bit more comfortable. Now let's go ahead and get into the ecosystem. As of the making of this video, the PlayStation VR 2 is coming out with 40 launch titles, which is actually really good. I mean, 40 new games for any system actually is a really good launch. There is something there for everyone. Although there is a caveat here, and that is that many of those games are also available on the Quest 2 and other VR systems. And that's where the Quest 2 just has a little bit more of an advantage this time, because it is a more mature and well-rounded ecosystem, because it's had a head start, right? You know, it's been out for several years now, and it's, by all accounts, a big success. And so there is a lot of people who have created games and apps for it. And really, the PlayStation VR 2 is an accessory to the PlayStation 5. It's really meant to complement that console, kind of like the original was to the PlayStation 4. Where on the Quest 2, it's its own ecosystem. You put on the headset and then you're immediately put into a 3D environment of your choosing. This is one of my favorite things about the Quest 2, because you're in VR all the time, right? And you can actually be at a lodge, or you can be in space, or you can be in all these other locations while you're using the menu system. And it just feels like it's built more for VR. I also like how the Quest 2 has the ability to not just play games, but you can watch 3D movies, you can jump into some travel apps, there's chat apps on there, there's business applications. Again, it's a whole VR world here. And Meta has continued to update the headset over the years. So, for instance, you don't need a Facebook login like you used to when it first came out. They've unlocked additional performance, and they've also added things like voice commands. You also have the ability to use a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. It now supports 120 hertz. You can gift apps to people. It has cloud backups. It's just got a bunch of stuff that they keep adding to the Quest 2, so it's a very mature ecosystem. Where on the PlayStation VR, it's really, again, just an extension or an accessory to your PlayStation 5. And that's cool. I mean, it's doing what it's designed to do, but it's not entirely as deep. By the way, I know people will ask, and no, unfortunately, you cannot play 3D Blu-ray movies on the new PlayStation VR 2. Not everybody's going to care about that, but I thought it was pretty cool. Maybe they'll bring it to the new headset. I don't know. All right, now let's take a look at some games, and this is where the PlayStation VR 2 really shines. Graphics in games are noticeably better and significantly upgraded, especially when you compare them to the original PlayStation VR, which is to be expected, right? This is the next generation of that. But they are also better when compared to the same game running on the Quest 2. So for instance, here you see Star Wars, and on the left is the PlayStation VR 2 version, and then on the right is the one from the Quest 2. In addition to the slightly improved resolution, I do think you are benefiting here from having that PlayStation 5 console helping push the performance of almost every VR game here. And so side-by-side comparisons of games from both systems really help demonstrate this pretty well. Plus, again, you're getting the benefit of that eye tracking technology, which, like I said, is really cool. And speaking of Gran Turismo 7, it has to be stated that if you are a racing game fan, this is your game. This is your setup. This is your experience. It blows everyone away who tries this. There's something to be said about sitting in a cockpit with a steering wheel in VR and just getting that sense of space that you just can't get with a 2D flat monitor. It's amazing. In the past, when I've tried to play racing games like this on other headsets, I would typically experience motion sickness. And I gotta tell you, for some reason with this game on this new headset, I don't get motion sick, and I play this game for hours now. So for me, this is the killer app for the PlayStation VR 2. Honestly, it's awesome. It really, really is. The other game that's kind of the killer app for the PlayStation VR 2 is Horizon Call of the Mountain. This game probably has the best graphics of any game so far on the system, and it really showcases just the power of both the PS5 and the VR headset together. The first hour of this game really tends to blow people away, both in the detail and the scale of it and the immersion. It's really cool. Moss is a series of puzzle games that have come out on other systems. I played the original on the Quest 2, and you see the sequel here running on the PSVR 2. And again, very similar experience, but it just feels and runs a little bit better on the new hardware. It seems like the game is just a little less blurry here. It's probably, again, using the eye tracking and just the additional power of the PlayStation 5. Another thing I want to mention is that the PlayStation VR 2 doesn't support the original PlayStation VR games, which to me is a huge bummer. Now, I know this is a next generation VR headset, but for me personally, it is a massive letdown because I had a decent selection of original PlayStation VR games. You see them right here. I was all in. And there are a handful of original PlayStation VR exclusives that do deserve to be updated or upgraded down the line. Maybe they will, I don't know. But, you know, I guess it would be cool if at least you could just run them. You know what I mean? Instead of having to have your PS4 with the original headset set up, you know? I don't know. It's just, again, it's a little bit of a disappointment from a fan like me who was all in on the original headset, the original experience. So, do I recommend you get the PlayStation VR 2 or the Meta Quest 2? Here's the thing. The PlayStation VR 2 is very expensive, especially when you consider that you have to own a PS5 as well. So the total to own it is $400 for the base PS5, plus another $550 for the VR headset. We're talking over $900 just to get started with it. The other side of it is that you can get into the Meta Quest 2 for about $400. And again, it stands alone. You don't need a computer or a console at all to use it. And the Quest 2 doesn't really feel as dated today as you might expect. I think a lot of that has to do that they've been constantly updating the operating system, and also now developers have a good handle on squeezing the most out of that system as possible. So I guess I would say that if you already have a PS5 and you want the latest and greatest VR for that system, well, then I don't think you're going to be disappointed in the PlayStation VR 2 at all. It's really great technology and a lot of the games are fantastic. However, if you don't have a PS5 or a powerful gaming computer and you just want a standalone VR device, well, I think the Quest 2 is a great option. It's an easy recommendation. And like I said, it's way, way cheaper. Do I regret buying the PlayStation VR 2? No, I mean, I'm all in on this stuff. I like all the latest and greatest gadgets and toys and experiences here. I really do enjoy VR, but I have to admit that as of today, it's a hard pill to swallow. You know, it's really expensive, and I don't know if it's that much better than what's already out there for half the price. Anyways, guys, I'd love to know what you think. I also want to thank the people who helped me make this video. We got Will and also Nicole and Scott. Thanks so much for coming over and giving me your feedback on the new headset. And as always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.